My name is Oliver. My name used to mean something, but now it only echoes dully in my head, like an echo in an empty hallway. I live in a small house on the outskirts of town. This house is old, wooden, with cracked paint on the window frames. It seems to be as tired as I am. Every creaking step of it sounds like a reminder: you are old, you are becoming obsolete, you have been forgotten. My children. They are successful. Each of them has a career, a home, their own worries. I used to be proud that I was able to give them a start, that I invested everything I had in them. But these days they rarely come to me. And when they do appear, it is as if out of compulsion, to mark a duty. They look through me, they don't hear the words, they don't notice the little things. They think I'm grumbling when I ask about their lives, when in reality I'm just trying to stay close for a little while. Grandchildren. Even worse. They've grown up in a world where old age is a burden. They look at their phones and find it hard to even lift their heads to answer. Sometimes I hear sighs, long, irritated, as if my question or presence is stealing their precious time. I feel like for them I'm just an extra noise that can be turned off. In the store, the saleswoman drops her change without looking up. In the hospital, the doctor writes something on a card without even listening to me fully. People on the street walk past as if through me. I become transparent, and that's scarier than death. Death means the end, but indifference is an endless fading, where you're still alive, but to others you've long since ceased to matter. Every morning I get up at 6, even though there's no point. No work, no meetings, no plans. I sit by the window, watching the world come to life, and inside me there is only silence. Sometimes I take old photos, young faces, celebrations, children's first steps. And every time I feel something shrinking inside. After all, back then I was needed. I was a support, I was a strength. Now I am just a shadow wandering through the rooms. The worst thing is this silence, filled with resentment. It is no longer just loneliness, it is beginning to rot inside me. I feel resentment taking root, penetrating my thoughts, turning into a dark, sticky liquid. I try to drive these thoughts away, but they return. Because every day, every hour, I am reminded that I am a nobody. Sometimes I think, maybe this is really justice. A person is getting old, and the world has the right to turn away. But no. I am not asking for much. Just a little respect, a little warmth. I am not a stone on the side of the road. I am still a person. And my heart is still beating, even though no one can hear it. My soul is beginning to crack like parched earth. I feel the first signs of decay, not physical, but internal. Anger is quietly growing, like a weed that someone threw into the ground long ago and forgot about. It is still small, but I already know, one day it will sprout so tall that it will shade all the light. I sit in a chair by the window and let memory slowly pull me out of this cold present into the past years. Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps me afloat. Memories are my only luxurious treasure, and at the same time my curse. I was different once. I remember the times when my word had weight. People listened to me, my business partners waited for a decision, and my workers looked on with respect. I was not born wealthy. Everything I had was earned with sweat, blood, and sleepless nights. I remember starting with a small shop in the market. Back then, I unloaded boxes myself, counted pennies myself and bargained with suppliers to survive. But I had strength, I knew I would not break. The business grew. I gathered a team of people I could trust. We worked day and night, and gradually the name Oliver became a symbol of honesty. I always said, a deal is not a piece of paper, a deal is a word. If your word is worthless, then you are nothing. And people believed me. I raised them with me. My family. I was most proud of them. The children grew up in abundance, but I tried to teach them to value work. I was there when they took their first steps, when they held diplomas, when they met their loved ones. I always believed that all my strength and success were for them. I wanted them not to have to experience the humiliations that I once experienced. But there is another side to memories. Losses. I buried my wife 10 years ago. Her death was the first serious blow for me that I could not repel. She was my support. Everything I built for the two of us. After her departure, I felt for the first time that the world could become cold. However, even then there were children nearby who said, "Dad, hang in there, we will always be there." I believed. Today, looking back, I see the irony. I gave them everything: strength, confidence, a path in life. But now, when my hands tremble, when my back aches with every movement, when I need simple human warmth so much, I am not there for them. In their eyes, I am a relic of the past, a voice that can be silenced. The contrast cuts to the soul. I see myself young, I am confident, straightforward, in an expensive suit, with a sparkle in my eyes that says, "I can do anything." And I see myself now, a gray-haired, hunched old man, looking for glasses to read the bill, and counting change at the cash register with trembling fingers. In my memories, I again smell fresh coffee in my office, I hear phone calls that decided the fate of deals. I hear my wife's voice laughing when we plan a trip together. I feel the fire burning inside me again. And then I return to the present, and I see only the walls of my quiet, abandoned house. There is nothing more terrible than when your past shines brighter than your future. Because then you understand, you have already lived the best life, and all that is left is to wait for the end. But I don't want to wait. I still remember who I was. And this memory does not let me die completely. It not only warms, it burns. It awakens something in me that I was afraid to think about. I gave them life, strength, opportunities. I sacrificed myself. And now I have received emptiness in return. Maybe, this emptiness will become the soil on which something else will grow. Darker. There are days that leave scars on me. I can forget what I ate yesterday or what I read last week, but the humiliation cuts into my memory like a knife. And each one becomes a small death. I remember calling my daughter. There was anxiety in my voice, I was really sick that evening. I could barely stand, dizziness was covering me in waves. She answered dryly, "Dad, I'm really busy right now. Maybe you can call a taxi and get to the hospital yourself." I wanted to say that I was afraid of falling on the way, but I stopped. She had already hung up. I sat by the phone then, like a boy who had forgotten to pick me up from school. Lonely and useless. My grandson, who is 20, once said to me, "Grandpa, you don't understand anything in modern life. You're behind. Nobody needs your advice." This was said in front of the whole family. I felt my words turn to dust before they even left my lips. Everyone was silent. No one defended me. Everyone took his words as something obvious. I smiled then to hide the pain, but inside everything collapsed. At the hospital, I was sitting in the hallway, waiting for an appointment. I was called, the doctor didn't even look up from his papers. He quickly flipped through the pages, asked questions in an even voice, not waiting for an answer. I tried to explain that the pain had been going on for a week, but he waved his hand. "At your age, it's normal. Take these pills." There was not a drop of sympathy in his voice. For him, I was just another number, an aging statistic that could be written off. Even in the store, I saw the saleswoman impatiently passing change from hand to give it to me as soon as possible. She said, "Hurry up, old man, because there's a line of normal people behind you." Normal people, not like me. I have swallowed these small defeats for a long time. I knew how to keep quiet because I believed that dignity lies in restraint. But now I am beginning to understand, they perceive my silence as weakness. They think that they can treat me as they please because I will not answer. Because I am old. I have a diary. An old, tattered notebook with a leather cover. It contains neither thoughts nor memories. It contains names. Dates. Details. I began to write them not to complain, but to remember. To not lose anything. Because every insult is a brick. And when there are enough of them, something much more can be built from them than just a wall of silence. I know every day when I have been neglected. I know every word that has killed me more slowly than a knife to the heart. And now I see this list in front of me, like a map of debts waiting to be returned. Every laugh behind my back. Every indifferent response. Every refusal to help. They think these are little things that dissolve into everyday life. But I remember everything. And memory is my weapon. I no longer feel regret. Only cold concentration. Because when you are killed piece by piece every day, one day you stop being afraid of dying, and you start thinking about how to die. This day began like any other. It seemed that nothing foreshadowed any change. I went to the store, a routine, but even such a small thing was a test for me. My hands were shaking from the weight of the packages. I felt every step give way to pain in my back. But I kept quiet because I didn't want to show weakness. At the bus stop, I tripped, and the packages slipped out of my hands. I stood there, watching an apple roll across the asphalt, and felt something inside me tighten. I dared to look up and ask for help. The usual thing to do is to ask someone to support an old man, to pick up a few groceries from the ground. I stretched out my hand to a guy in his 30s standing nearby. "Please help me," my voice broke, it seemed foreign to me. He looked at me, and laughed. Not quietly, not awkwardly, but loudly, mockingly. "Can't you do it yourself? Why are you coming here then?" His words hit harder than any fist. I heard a few more laughs around me. The people standing nearby didn't turn away, didn't come closer, didn't extend their arms. They laughed. Someone whispered, "Look, Grandpa can barely stand, and he's still stretching." I felt my heart beat slower and slower, the blood rushing in my ears. At that moment, I heard nothing but mockery. My vision blurred. The world seemed to recede, as if I were looking at everything through thick glass. I saw only faces distorted by mockery, saw an apple rolling under a stranger's feet, and no one bending down to pick it up. And then something cracked inside me. The silence inside, which for years had been nothing but emptiness, was filled with something else. Cold, dark, sharp. I picked up the packages myself. Silently. I turned around and went home. But each step was different. It was no longer the gait of an old man who could be broken. It was the gait of a man who had made a choice. I sat in the dark at home for a long time. The hours passed, and I looked out the window without turning on the light. And in this darkness I felt a new presence, not someone else's, but mine. The one I had once been. The one who did not forgive insults. The one who knew how to play with people so that they did not even notice how they had fallen into a trap. The silence of my house was no longer empty. It was filled with anger that, for the first time in many years, did not seem like weakness. It was strength. Pure, cold, irreversible. I opened the diary again. I turned the pages with names. I looked at each entry, and I felt my heart beat more evenly, calmly. This was not chaotic rage, this was not a scream. This would be retribution. Cold, precise, ruthless. They all think I was a victim. That I am a shadow. But now the game begins. My game. And there will be no accidents in it. I took out my phone again, old, worn, with a broken screen. For how many years had I used it only for short calls to my children, who were always in a hurry to hang up? But now it had become a tool for a different purpose. The numbers were still stored in my memory. Old acquaintances, partners, those with whom we once did business, and sometimes solved issues using not quite correct methods. I knew, the world forgets the old, but the old never forget the world. I knew how to listen, how to gather information, how to wait. And now all this came in handy. I didn't want to hit them or shout at them. That would be too simple and unworthy. I wanted each of them to feel my presence. So that their lives, at first glance, flowed as usual, but at some point everything began to fall apart. And so that they could not understand why. My son, who was proud of his impeccable reputation as a financier, suddenly received a check from the tax office. No one knew that a small anonymous package with copies of documents had ended up where it needed to be. I knew where to look for these weaknesses. After all, he himself once boasted to me that he had cheated a little to save money. I only pushed the avalanche. My daughter, who loved to show the world a picture of an ideal family, suddenly encountered a leak of photos of a man who had forgotten to delete correspondence with his girlfriend. It would seem like a coincidence. But there are no coincidences when someone who knows how to place accents is in charge. My grandson, self-confident and impudent, one day received a strange message on his phone. An unknown prankster had distributed a video among his friends in which he humiliated an elderly person in a public place. It was a long time ago, but I remembered and kept the proof. He had to explain himself. His friends looked at him differently. His laughter turned against him. I acted in the shadows. Carefully, methodically. Everything seemed like a series of random failures, like tiny cracks that were starting to corrode the perfect picture of their lives. I just pushed, gave an invisible push. And every time they stumbled, I sat in the darkness of my house and felt a strange feeling grow inside me, not joy, but peace. It was a game. And I knew I would win it. Because they didn't have what I had, patience. They were used to a quick result, to an easy life. They don't know how to wait. And I waited my whole life. Each new fall of my loved ones was not so much revenge as a lesson. I wanted them to understand, the person they considered a shadow still had power. So that they would see in the mirror not only themselves, but also me. My eyes, watching them even when they thought they were alone. And I remained in the shadow. They didn't suspect that all this was an invisible hand that they had been pushing away for years. Now that hand was touching their lives, and every touch left a mark. I wasn't looking for their love. I no longer believed in warm words or promises. But I demanded one thing, respect. And I knew I would make them learn. Now my house is filled with silence again. But it is not the old silence that made me suffocate. It is different, calm, tense, like a spider's web after rain, when every drop shines and keeps the balance of the whole world. I sit by the window, as always, but for the first time in many years I do not feel empty. I see my son nervously calling lawyers, my daughter crying in the hallway of her own house, trying to hide her shame from her neighbors. I hear my grandson avoiding his friends, because now he is not a brave hero, but a coward who mocked the old people. They all do not yet know that the threads converge on me. For them, this is a chain of failures, unfortunate coincidences, but they are already learning to see differently. For the first time in many years, when I enter the room, they are silent. They no longer allow themselves to be despised. Now in their eyes, not love, no, I did not achieve this and did not strive for it. But is there something else? Fear. Respectful caution. Let it be so. Because even fear is better than indifference. Society is also starting to see me. A neighbor who once walked by without saying hello now stops to nod. The shop assistant looks more closely. And even in the hospital, the doctor finally looks up at me when I speak. I didn't demand anything from them. But now they feel, they can't treat me the way they used to. I'm not a hero. I didn't look for applause. I've only regained my right to be. My life hasn't become easier, my body is still old and fragile. But my soul hasn't. My soul is holding its shape again. I've learned not to forgive. Forgiveness is a luxury for those who aren't erased from life like dust. But I don't destroy either. I've just shown that a shadow can be stronger than the sun. And that old age doesn't mean weakness. Now my diary is almost full. Every name, every date is a part of my story. The last entry in it reads, "I am not a shadow. I am a reminder." Those who forget the past always become its victims. I close the notebook, and I feel relieved. Because now I know, no one will erase me anymore.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.